In 2009, Gearbox dropped something that changed shooters forever. It wasn't just another FPS, it was an RPG looting madness machine. With 4 wild characters and millions of guns. Nobody had seen anything like it. Today, we're breaking down why Borderlands isn't just a game. It's a blueprint that defined a generation of looter shooters. From Roland to the latest Vault Hunters, as well as from Borderlands 1 all the way to Borderlands 4. This is a story of a masterpiece that just keeps on getting better. What happens when you mix FPS combat with RPG progression and millions of guns? Well, you would get Borderlands, but no one saw this coming back in 2009. The shooter landscape was completely different then. Everyone was playing military sims or arena shooters, all taking themselves way too seriously. Gearbox actually started with a realistic sci-fi concept that just wasn't working. The gameplay itself felt stiff, the world felt empty, and they knew they had to make a change. So they made the craziest gamble imaginable. They threw out the realistic graphics and went full cel-shaded madness. They built everything around a loot-driven gameplay when nobody was asking for it. This wasn't some calculated business decision. This is a desperate Hail Mary from a studio that needed to try something different. Back in 2009, the FPS world was locked into one formula: Call of Duty, Battlefield, Halo. Every shooter wanted to be a cinematic military blockbuster. Realistic guns, 3D campaigns, iron sights, brown and gray color palettes. No one was experimenting, and nobody was asking for something different. Gearbox looked at that and said, if we release another realistic shooter, we'll just disappear. But pitching something wild was dangerous. Investors hated risk. Publishers wanted safe bets, and remember, this was a time when cel-shaded meant cartoon game, not AAA blockbuster. On top of that, they fused genres that no one thought should mix. RPG stats in a shooter, randomized loot in a co-op campaign, millions of guns when most shooters barely had a dozen. In the end, they were betting their future on something completely untested. And what they created completely changed everything. 4 completely distinct Vault Hunters, each playing like their own game. Roland dropped turrets that could shield you and lay down covering fire. Lilith could phase walk through enemies and become invisible, while Mordecai sent his Bloodwing to attack from a distance. And Brick? He just punched everything into oblivion. You couldn't find this variety in any other shooter. But the real magic was the loot loop. The first orange drop, nothing compares to that feeling. You'd spend hours grinding enemies, just hoping for that next upgrade. That perfect weapon with the right scope and elemental damage. Other shooters gave you set loadouts. Borderlands? It gave you completely endless possibilities. Trust me, that addiction hit different. You'd tell yourself one more mission at 2 AM, still chasing that legendary shotgun. No other franchise created that same obsessive loop of kill, loot, upgrade, repeat. Borderlands 1 built the DNA that every looter shooter would copy for the next decade. This wasn't just another shooter, it was a complete blueprint for an entire genre. Now, how do you improve on a formula that already changed everything? That was the challenge Borderlands 2 faced after the first game's explosive success. They couldn't just give us better guns and call it a day. They needed something that justified a sequel when the original already felt revolutionary. And that solution was placed on the unexpected villain. Handsome Jack didn't just show up as another bad guy. He became the most memorable antagonist in gaming. Only through pure personality. His constant taunting over the Echo device made it personal. He wasn't just some distant threat. He was actively mocking you, insulting your progress, and making you genuinely want to take him down. Like, just listen to what he says here.
Me with a spoon. A freaking spoon, and I'm dying laughing, right? The moral is, you're a total bitch.
But the improvements ran much deeper than just a story. The skill trees expanded dramatically, turning each Vault Hunter into multiple characters wrapped in one. You could build Salvador the Gunzerker as a tank, a damage dealer, or even a support character. All the choices are valid, and all have completely different playstyles, as well as side missions stopped being filler content and became memorable stories that expanded the world. Remember that mission where you helped a struggling bandit become a successful businessman? That stuff stuck with people. The humor found its perfect tone too. Dark, absurd, constantly breaking the fourth wall without feeling forced. Characters would acknowledge they were in a video game. Weapons would have ridiculous red text, and the entire experience embraced its own insanity. This wasn't just loot driven madness anymore. It was loot driven madness with heart and personality. Borderlands 2 didn't just iterate on the formula, it perfected what the first game started while adding layers nobody knew were missing. This shooting felt tighter, the loot felt more rewarding, and the world felt more alive. This became the gold standard that every looter shooter would get measured to for the next years to come. It proved that sequels could actually improve on near perfect foundations. What happens when you take a winning formula and throw it into low gravity? The pre-sequel answered that question by taking Borderlands to Pandora's moon, and the result was the franchise's biggest gamble. They had to bridge the story gap between the first two games while making it feel fresh enough to justify existing. That's a dangerous balancing act. Change too much, and you alienate your base. Change too little, and people call it lazy. The low gravity mechanics completely rewrote how combat flowed. Suddenly, you're doing massive jumps, floating through the air while shooting, and managing oxygen levels like some kind of space survivalist. It wasn't just visual flair. You had to think about your positioning differently, as well as use cover in new ways and time your attacks during those extended airborne moments. Then they broke the character selection rules entirely by making Claptrap playable. The character who'd become comic relief and mission delivery bot suddenly had his own skill tree and action package. Laser weapons introduced entirely new damage types and behavior patterns, while cryo damage added strategic freezing options that changed how you approached enemy encounters. But the real value was in the story context. Seeing Handsome Jack's transformation from company man to full villain gave his Borderlands 2 character so much more depth. You understood why he became what he became, and it made beating him in the second game feel so much more meaningful. Fans recognized what the pre-sequel was doing even if they didn't love it as much as Borderlands 2. The experimental mechanics with lunar settings showed Gearbox wasn't afraid to take risks with their winning formula. This was the necessary testing ground that proved the franchise could evolve beyond Pandora's deserts and bandit camps. Without the pre-sequel's willingness to try new things, we might never have gotten the planetary hopping or movement innovations that came later. It was the evolution the series needed to survive long term. How do you bring a classic franchise into the modern era? Borderlands 3 faced that exact challenge. They needed to justify next-gen technology while staying true to what made the series special. The result was a game that perfected gameplay while creating the franchise's biggest storytelling divide. You finally got to leave Pandora and explore multiple planets. Each world has its own ecosystem, enemies, and visual identity. Promethea's urban combat felt completely different from Eden 6's swampy jungles. This was a scope fans had imagined since the first game's concept art. The gunplay reached its peak here. Weapons felt more responsive, with better feedback and impact than the previous entry. You could feel the difference between manufacturer styles just from the recoil patterns and reload animations. Each gun company now played by completely different rules. Some regenerated ammo, others had alternate fire modes, some even grew more accurate the longer you held the trigger. Action skill augments changed everything about character building. Now you can customize your skills with modifiers that alter their behavior, elements, and even their visual effects. One Vault Hunter could have dozens of viable builds instead of just following a set path. Movement got the modern treatment too, sliding into combat, mantling over cover, and ground slams that actually felt impactful. The weapon manufacturers became more distinct than ever. You could immediately tell a Malawan from a Jacobs just by how it handled. Each brand had its own philosophy that extended beyond stats into how you actually played with their guns. Despite the story complaints about certain villains, Borderlands 3 proved the core mechanics could evolve without losing their soul. The shooting felt incredible, the loot system reached new heights, and the moment-to-moment gameplay achieved near perfection. This wasn't just another sequel. It was proof that the franchise's foundation could support modern expectations while keeping what made it special intact. What happens when a franchise remembers what made it great? Borderlands 4 faced that exact challenge after the previous game's story divided the fan base. They had to win people back while still moving forward. That's always the tricky part. Innovate enough to feel fresh, but stay true to what built the franchise in the first place. The gameplay mechanics reached their highest refinement level yet. Everything feels tighter and more responsive while keeping that signature Borderlands feel. Movement systems got a serious upgrade. The sliding, mantling, and air control all feel familiar, but drastically improved. You get that same fluid combat flow, but with more precision and control than ever before. The narrative course correction directly addressed what didn't work before. Characters get better development, the stakes feel more personal, and the humor lands without undermining tense moments. It's a classic Borderlands tone, but executed with more maturity and consistency. Weapon diversity exploded beyond anything we've seen in the series. You're finding guns with combinations of effects, firing modes, and behaviors that make previous entries look basic by comparison. Each manufacturer's identity feels more distinct, while still offering unexpected surprises that keep the loot hunt exciting. Each Vault Hunter managed to feel both fresh and completely true to the franchise's legacy. Their action skills build on what worked before, while introducing new mechanics that change how you approach combat. You get the same sense of discovering synergies between skills and gear that made the earlier games so addictive. Borderlands 4 perfected the balance between innovation and tradition. The shooting feels more modern, the loot system offers more variety, and the movement keeps pace with contemporary shooters. But underneath all that, the core Borderlands magic remains untouched. This is what happens when a franchise evolves without forgetting its DNA. They remembered why people fell in love with Pandora in the first place, giving us reasons to keep coming back. What makes Borderlands Evolution so special compared to other franchises? Most game series hit their peak and then either stagnate or completely lose their identity trying to chase trends. Look at how many beloved franchises have crashed and burned by forgetting what made them work. Borderlands faced those exact same risks every single new entry. The pressure to reinvent while keeping the soul intact. It was genius on how they protected the core loot loop of everything else. The addiction of kill, loot, upgrade, repeat remained sacred across all the changes. They could add new planets, new gravity, new movement systems, but that fundamental dopamine hit never got compromised. It's why you can jump from the first game to the latest and still feel the same excitement when an orange beam shoots out of an enemy. Character diversity kept the gameplay fresh without abandoning what worked. Each new Vault Hunter offered completely different playstyles while still fitting the Borderlands mold. They never tried to make the characters feel like other games. They expanded what already worked while introducing new mechanics that felt natural to the universe. The humor and tone maintained consistency despite all the narrative evolution. That dark, self-aware comedy never turned into something else. Even when the stories got more serious or experimental, the writing knew exactly when to be absurd and when to pull back, creating that perfect balance that defines the series. Experimental features were always tested without compromising the core experience. Low gravity, oxygen management, laser weapons, those were risks that could have broken the game, but they were implemented as additions rather than replacements. The weapon generation improved dramatically with each entry while keeping the magic feel of unpredictability alive. You never knew what crazy combinations of parts and effects you'd find, but it always felt like a Borderlands gun. Borderlands mastered the art of evolutionary refinement. They proved that you can change everything from the setting to the mechanics to the scope without losing what made the franchise great in the first place. That's the blueprint other developers should study. How to grow without abandoning your foundation. This franchise shows that real evolution means building on what works rather than tearing it down. Borderlands didn't just create a genre. It perfected how franchises evolved. While others lose their way chasing trends, this series kept improving its core loop across every release. That commitment to refinement while staying true to its identity is still why it dominates. Now, I want to hear your takes. Drop your hottest Borderlands opinions in the comments. Which game nailed it for you and why? This franchise proves great games can keep getting better while developers understand what made them special in the first place. And the evolution continues.